everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Let's see what we're up to today. Time to do something with this. I've been looking at it, sitting there for about 3 years now, and it's starting to get on my nerves. I need this thing out of here and under the truck where it's supposed to be. So we're going to drag it out, get it on some axle stands, and see what we got to do with it. This is the 9 1/4 sure grip axle that we're going to be putting in our little red truck. So this thing's been sitting around a long time. I can't even remember where I got it from. I parted out a few Ram Chargers back in the day. It's probably out of one of those. It's small bolt pattern, so it's like 80 or older. It's missing one axle, but it's okay. I've got a couple up there. Lucky left and right, same axle in these things. So we'll clean them both up, and whichever one looks better we'll use. We're going to pull this axle out. We're going to check the wheel bearings. That's pretty much the only thing I didn't buy for it. That just an oversight on my part. So I'll probably grab 2 wheel bearings for it. The original vent is all screwed up. You can see here, there's just a hole drilled in the axle tube, and they had this little shroud over it. So we'll clean that all off, and what we'll do is we'll drill it bigger and put in a barb, and we'll run a hose up into the frame like on a newer truck. I'll go to the boneyard and grab one off a newer Ram. It'll have the little plastic breather cap on the top of it and everything. We'll just run it up into the frame somewhere. And okay, we got the cross shaft and the little retainer pin out. Now we can knock this axle in. Oh, heard the C-clip fall out. Good. Perfect. Oh, look at that. Don't know if that'll clean up. Good thing we've got 2 axles. And we'll be ordering 2 wheel bearings too. Now I'll blast these 4 nuts off each side and get these old rotten backing plates off. And then we'll have a look at the flanges on the rear end. Make sure that we've got something we can work with here. If these are all rotted in behind, not really much we can do with it. Yeah, they came right off. No broken bolts. The actual flanges are good and solid. So, yeah, awesome. Now we can get these old seals and bearings out. I fished the one C-clip that was holding this axle out of it. And then I went in my junk drawer and found another one. The other one from here, it's long gone. I looked around in there. It's not in there, so it can't get tangled up in anything. So now I'm going to pop this out, get the brake hose off, and then we're going to see about rolling it up and getting the yoke off, because we have to put a pinion seal in this thing. Okay, we're going to use a 1 1/4 socket to blast this big nut off, and then hopefully the yoke will come off without much of a fight. But there's only one way to find out. Well, I got it off, and I only whacked the oil slinger a couple of times. That's all right, we'll straighten that out. No worries. You can see the awful gucky mess in there. Yuck. So I'll pop this old seal out of here. Gotta go find my seal puller. We'll get that out, and it can get ready for the new one to go in. Now we'll get the axle seal, and they've got a flange on them, so you just get right back there, you can feel it, and you just start working your way around, and it'll pop right out. And out she comes. No, almost. It's still struggling, but it'll come out. There we go, she's out. Now I'll see if I've got a puller for these wheel bearings. There's a tool that goes in and hooks behind them, and you can either draw them out with a bolt or whack them out with a slide hammer. And because this is not attached to a car, it's just sitting on some jack stands, I would probably be inclined to want to draw it out with a bolt. So we'll see what we can come up with. We may even have to make something. Well, so much for that. That thing is really stuck in there. And my little puller, all it did was grab the rollers and break the outer race and pull everything out. It just doesn't. I should have made it a little bigger so it would grab behind that race, and we might have a little better luck getting it out. Anyway, we're going to go try it on the other side and see what happens. So what I'll do now is I'll just get in there with the torch and just zip, just slice that right through there like that, and then they'll come right out. There we go. The trick is to cut just the bearing, not the rear end housing, you know. There we go. Bearings out, no damage to the housing. I knocked off the remains of the little house or whatever that the original vent was in, and it only had like a 1/4 inch hole, so I drilled it out to 21/64, which is just a tiny bit shy of a letter Q drill, which is technically what you need to tap for 1/8 pipe. But anyway, 21/64 is close enough, and I ran a 1/8 pipe tap through it, and now we could screw this little hose barb on. Here's a little bracket that goes on the bolt that holds the flex hose to the axle tube, and it is all rotted away. With the purpose of this bracket, you see here that little saddle there, it grabs the parking brake cable. So we just got a piece of metal. I copied that one. Thankfully there was enough left of it, and we made a new one, so it'll just go on there like that. And I also made right here, there's little brackets that are actually welded onto the axle tube to hold the brake line, and they're long gone on both sides. So we made up 2 of those, and I'll go ahead and just give that a little grind, and we'll weld them on with the wire feed welder. We can start working on the yoke now, but the first thing we had to do is it was sitting around a long time with this U-joint strap still on, and the bolts were really stuck. So I just went ahead and heated this up, got these bolts free, so it can sit here and cool off for now. Here's our new pinion seal, and when you get these things, there's a few different ones. Not that many, but just to be sure, always before you hammer this thing in, just kind of hold it here and make sure it seems like it's the right one for the bore, and just make sure that it's going to fit the yoke, right? And I've already done that. This is good. So what we have to do is pack the back of it. You see the little spring there? That's what puts the tension on the lip. And we don't want that to pop out when we drive it in. So we pack this whole cavity full of grease. That'll keep the little spring in. And because this seal is not coated, we're going to put a little bit of sealant around it so we know 100% sure that it's not going to leak around where it's pressed in, because it doesn't take much. A little gouge or a little bit of pitting, and it'll seep oil out there and drive you crazy. Some of the seals now do come with coating already on them, like a seal coat, but this one doesn't. So we're just going to put a little bit of sealer in it to be 100% sure. All right, so we've got the back side of the seal packed, we've got the lip of the seal greased, and we've got some sealant around the outside diameter of the seal. Now we can go ahead and put it in. So we'll just get it started, and you can slowly work it in, tap around it with a hammer, or if you've got something, you could get something to hold against it and whack on that. This might be better because this ensures a little more that it'll go in straight. Okay, so you can work your way around it like this and slowly kind of get it going, but you do stand the risk of distorting it. So we're going to get this thing here, and you can see there it spreads the load on the seal and drives it in straight. I mean, sometimes there's no alternative other than working your way around it with a hammer. If you haven't got a driver, I'm sure there's a special tool for this too, eh? But, well, guess what? We don't have it. Now we gotta just clean this up because the lip of the seal may not sit in exactly the same place. we don't want it running on all this rust and crap here. So we're going to get a piece of emery, get that all cleaned up, and then we're going to check it for a groove. All right. So you can see there where there's a line where the seal was running originally, but there's no appreciable groove or anything cut in it. So this is fine. This yoke can be reused. My stupidity. That's something you should check before you hammer your new seal in, because you can buy a seal with a repair sleeve, but the inside diameter of the seal is slightly larger to compensate for the sleeve. Anyway, we got away with it this time. Now a little word before we put the pinion yoke back on. This differential has a crush sleeve in between the front and rear pinion bearings. And theoretically, anytime you take the yoke off, you should put a new crush sleeve in and go through the factory procedure to reset the preload on the pinion bearings. Now, most of the time, you can get away with just doing what we're going to do, which is just run the thing down till it's tight and just give it a few pops with an impact gun, and it'll kind of end up where it was before. And you usually get away with it. We'll put a little Loctite on here to make sure that the nut doesn't move. And hey, down the road, if the pinion starts growling, then I guess we failed and we'll have to take it apart and put a new crush sleeve in it. But like I said, pretty much every time I've ever done this, I've gotten away with it. So we're going to hope our luck holds and just do it the same way. A little light oil on the splines to help the yoke slide on, and then we'll put some blue Loctite on here and get busy. So I ran it down one time without Loctite on it, just to get the yoke set down against everything, and it feels pretty good. So now we put some blue Loctite on it, and we're going to blast it here. Watch your ears. That's it. Another thing I've noticed now that I've got this thing sitting on stands right side up, that's pretty much about how it'll sit in the truck. You can see the angle on there. It's not too bad at all. I'm almost willing to bet that two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive trucks use the same axle or something very close, because I do remember on the four-wheel drive, it's got the blocks that go in here 3 or 4 inches, and they've got a heck of a taper machined into them. So I'm guessing the extra taper they needed for the 4x4 truck was made up with the lift block. Because this looks pretty darn good for what we need. Alrighty, so what we're going to do now is put the axle bearing and the axle seal in. So here's a new bearing. I don't know, as a rule, if there's any lettering on them, right here, INA, USA, that's alright. I always put that facing out. Don't ask me why, that's what I've always done. So we're going to put a little grease in the bore. You can use a little light oil. Something just to help the bearing get a little start, you know. And so we're using a great big socket here. And we'll just knock her home. And you'll feel it bottom out. There, hear the tone change? She's bottomed out. Now we'll put in our seal. So, we're going to pack the back of it like we do, right? So we don't lose our little spring when we drive it in. There we go. And get some on the lip. And then we're just going to start it in. You can start it in with a hammer. And just work your way around. Now this one does not have a flange. So if it had a flange, you would just drive it in, of course, till the flange hit the end of the tube and you're done. This one doesn't. So what we're going to do to make sure it's in straight, we're going to drive it in until it hits the bearing. There, you can hear it. So there's our wheel bearing and our axle seal in. We could just, if we want, put a little grease there on the bearing for when it starts up. Now we'll get our axle ready to go in. These old axles have been sitting in my shed a long time. This here is where the bearing runs. We have to get that cleaned up nice. And we need to get the spline cleaned up and any of this loose flaky crap off the shaft. We're also gonna get a wire brush and clean up the back side of it. We'll make a nice thing of it. We're gonna start on this with some 80 grit. This piece might not be long enough, but it'll get us started. And then we'll work our way down to 320. I think the next thing I got is 180, and then 320 will be last. It'll clean up. Oh yeah, that's nice. Now what do we got here? What's the next one? 180. Here we go. Piece of 180. Oh yeah, that's cleaning it right up. Good, beautiful. Now we got a bit of 320 here. Wish this thing would fit in my lathe and I could really clean it up nice, but that ain't happening. Won't fit in my lathe. Oh yeah, that's good. Let's see. Oh yeah. That'll work just fine. Now we're going to go over to the buffing wheel and clean up the rest of the shaft and the splines. Okay, so we're going to smear a little grease down. Well, we got this all cleaned up now. Smear a little grease on there, and we'll put a little bit on the splines. It can't hurt. There. Alrighty. Now let's get this camera out of the road, sort of. Okay. And the camera's in the road. Oh, no, we just barely cleared it. So we're going to slide the axle in, and when it gets to there, it's hitting the adjuster now for the side bearings. You just lift it up like that, pivot it. You're just pivoting it on the axle bearing, and push it through, and then jiggle it, and you'll get the splines engaged and push it all the way in. Now we can put the C-clip in. So you can see the end of the axle. Here's our C-clip. You just get it in there, like that, and push the axle out. So now you can see the C-clip is in the counter bore in the side gear, and it can't go anywhere. Now what we have to do is turn it so we can get the cross shaft put in. Now we're going to install the cross shaft, and there's two places it can go. On one side, it doesn't have a hole for the little retainer bolt. This is the side with the hole. So we want this side up, and we're going to push it in, trying to keep this as straight as possible, right? Sometimes you got to give it a little tap, get it started, and then reach around the back. Make sure the little bugger is straight. This is pretty dry in here, right? Normally if it was covered in axle lube, it might go in a little easier, but there, about like that. And then hopefully our little bolt will go in. Yeah, there we go. And then use a 5/16 wrench and just tighten this guy up. Don't kill it, just tighten it. Super, so now we can close this thing all up. Common practice with a job like this, like servicing a differential in a garage, if the cover had a gasket, it usually gets scraped off, swept up off the floor, and they just put a bead of RTV around it. And that's fine. There's millions of them out there running around. Lots of them came from the factory like that. But I decided I would go for it and spring the $5 and get a gasket. So we're gonna try and do this with just a gasket and no sealer and hope it doesn't leak. Let's do it old school. So, you know me and my grease on gaskets. So we're gonna go and grease this up here. It doesn't really do much except keep the gasket from sticking. And I think maybe it kind of lets it squish into the surface a little bit better. Like I said before, this is what the old guys taught me when I was an apprentice, and who might argue with them? Most of them learned their trade, during the war. Let's see if this thing has got 1,000 different ways it can go. It might, and we just got lucky the first time. Don't ask me. Anyhow, we'll grease this up. Put our cover on, and then start looking for the bolts. Wonder what I did with them. I'll be back. Okay, so we've got one clippy thing here for the brake line. I'm not sure which of these top bolts it goes on, but it goes on one. We're going to put it on that one. And then we could just start working around putting the bolts in. We'll run them in with the speeder and then get them with a torque wrench. What are those two dogs up to? They're okay, those two, when they're sleeping. What are you two doing? I think a little earlier they saw a mouse in here and they've been having a conniption ever since trying to find it. But that's all right, because you know what? Gives them something to do. Other than create mayhem, which is what they normally do. Okay. We got a couple of mismatched bolts here, but most of the trucks I've met aren't too bright. I don't think they'll notice the difference. There we go. Okay, let's run these all in with the speeder. All right, so we got our torque wrench set for 25 foot-pounds. That might be a little much. Let's try 20. Don't like the feel of that. That's better. So I'll just go around here and torque these things to 20. And with any luck, it won't leak. Okay, now it's time to fill this thing up. You fill it up until it runs out the hole here. So normally, if it was in the vehicle, you'd put these things there and squeeze it in until it just started running out. Because it's not in the vehicle, it's easier for us to, that hole there where the bolt for the flex hose goes, it's much easier to just squirt it in there. So, and sometimes even on a car, you can get away with, it's easier because the fuel tank will be here in the way. It's a lot easier. I think on my old Valiant, I used to do that. I used to squirt it in there. So anyway, it's 80W90, and what you have to make sure, limited slip, posi traction. If it doesn't say that, you got to go to the dealership or an auto parts place and get the limited slip additive and mix it in there in the proper proportion. Some diffs, like the one in our dually, it's a helical gear diff. And you don't need, even though it's an anti-spin axle, you don't need this stuff because it doesn't have clutches in it. Anyway, this one does have clutches in it. All right, so we got, contrary to what I looked up that said 2.5 of these, it took all 3 of them. And on these ones, it's just a little rubber plug. You pop it in and we're done. Okay, we're just turning it around a bit to get the lube worked into the bearings and stuff. I think that's going to do it for this one. In the next one, we're going to get the brakes on it, get all our other stuff on it, and get it in the truck. I'm pretty happy the way this has gone so far, and I'm not expecting any excitement on the rest of it. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for tuning into our little channel here. Hope you keep coming back to see what we're up to, and until we meet again, I'm Kevin saying so long from the Claremont Classic Garage.